As a father of a 6-year-old, this is a very interesting program to me, and I don't want to upstage anyone. I had a chance to get a preview of this $100 laptop. What a great thing, and thank you for really being on that board and trying to push that forward. I saw Meredith Singer here as I came in, and she was asking me a little bit about the competitiveness agenda that we're working on. So let me, I want to talk a little bit about that, but let me first say thanks to Greg. Many of you don't know this, but I am fully, and I absolutely mean this, I'm fully satisfied that I would not be here today as a member of Congress if it wasn't for Greg's help. Almost 30 years ago, I was the fledgling new executive director of the Democratic Party in Tennessee, and it was a very, there wasn't an organization. There was nothing there. And Greg was the dean of our Executive Directors Association, and so with his help, he learned me what I was supposed to do, and I thank Greg for that. And let me say also, I guess, as I mentioned, Lamar Alexander and I are working on some issues together, some math and science education issues, and he had a group in from Oak Ridge, and he wanted me to bring them up to date on what we were doing in the House. And so he introduced me, and it was certainly that Greg's was superior. He introduced me by saying, "This is my friend Bart Gordon. He is dean of our Tennessee congressional delegation." Then he quickly added, "Dean doesn't mean he's the smartest, just means he's been here the longest." And so I know I'm not the smartest person here today, but I do want to tell you something that I'm very concerned about, and I know I am smart enough to be concerned about it. As I mentioned, I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I sincerely mean this, and that I very much am concerned that she is going to be a part of the first generation of Americans that could very well inherit a standard of living less than their parents. And I see some other younger folks here too, when I say younger than Greg and I, that you don't have to be 6 years old to be in that, if you're 6 to 20, you can very well be in that generation. And that's the reason that I joined Lamar and Jeff Bingaman and Sherry Bowler a couple of years ago in asking the National Academies to do a report on competitiveness in America. And they had a very sobering report. It was chaired by Norm Augustine, former head of Lockheed Martin, Craig Barrett at Intel, and a variety of other academic as well as really high-level business performers. And their assessment was that we were on a losing track. And if there weren't changes, then my prediction, or not my prediction, my fear would come true in that my children and this next generation of children would inherit a national standard of living less than their parents. And they made a couple of recommendations. One, this is interesting in that it was a couple of years ago before all the fad got started, but one was energy independence. And I've introduced legislation concerning that, but I'm not going to talk about that now. But it's interesting. If they were right about that one, and clearly they were, then you think they're probably going to be right about the other one. And the other concern was trying to improve our math, science, and education skills of our children here in this country. And the reason that's important is that there's approximately 7 billion people in the world, half of which make less than $2 a day. And so clearly we don't want to compete and can't compete in that kind of labor market. Which means that if we're going to be competitive, it means if our kids are going to be able to have a good standard of living, then we've got to be making 50 widgets for every one widget they make. We've got to be hopefully inventing the widget maker and then also making the widget maker. In other words, we've got to work at a much higher skill level. But to do that, again, you have to have a higher level of math and science skills and engineering skills. And to put it in perspective, and we've all seen a variety of reports in terms of our students' competitiveness, but one of the most recent was indicated that only South Africa and Cyprus had worse scores than we do in this country, our students do in math and science. And what makes you even more worried is the longer our kids are in school, the worse they do in terms of that bit of competition there. So I think to solve any kind of problem, you have to better understand it. And so this committee went in and tried to look at how did this develop. And a very interesting thing was discovered, and that is that approximately 53% of our math teachers in this country have neither a major or certification to teach math. And approximately 89% of our physical science teachers have neither a major or a certification to teach physical science. And so it's, very difficult to inspire, much less to be able to just, communicate basic information in terms of raising those skill levels with our students when you don't have a background. And I think my father is a good example of that. My father was a farmer. World War II comes along and he enlists and goes off to war. He comes back and so many others of that generation had the opportunity to go to school on the GI Bill, something he would have never had otherwise. But he was still a farmer. He wanted to be a farmer, but he wanted to try to be a better farmer. And so he got his degree in agriculture. And then I come along, and my mother at that time worked in a high school cafeteria. And so she had to give up her job when I was born. And my father needed a second job. And like a lot of folks at that time, he applied to teach school, so he could still farm and teach school. And he was the last person hired at Smyrna High School in our county. And since he was the last person hired, you might know he was assigned to teach high school science and coach the girls basketball. And I'm not sure which he knew the least about. And I'm afraid, that's we see that oftentimes happening. Again, my father was a bright, good person, but he was put into a very difficult position for both himself and his students, and we see this happening over and over now. And so a part of the recommendations is we've got to raise this level of skill competence. I know that as we have innumerable Nobel laureates and other scientists of note that come before our committee, Science Technology. And when you ask them why did they get started, what gave them the inspiration to do what they're doing now, it's almost inevitably was a teacher. Occasionally it'll be Sputnik or an incident, but it really goes back to teachers in most cases. And in their report, it was over and over, it was about the teachers. You've got to raise those skills levels. And so I immediately, without any shame, plagiarized all their recommendations, put it into legislation, and introduced it last session. It didn't go very far last session, but it's funny how once you become chairman of the committee, you all of a sudden become smarter. I don't know, and your bills become more attractive. So we were able to really take all the recommendations of the it's called Rising Above the Gathering Storm. And we passed them all out of our committee. They were all bipartisan. They came out of the committee unanimously. They went on the House floor, and the most votes that any of them got against them was 21 on the House floor. We're in conference now, but that doesn't mean that you get things done easily around here. But hopefully, I know that it's the first priority of the Business Roundtable. Meredith and IBM are working hard on this and many others. So let me tell you what we're trying to do in this regard. And again, you got to keep in mind that the first aspect of it is trying to raise the skill level of our teachers. Well, first of all, we want to look at those thousands and thousands of teachers across the country that, like my father, were good teachers, but didn't have the background in their subject. And we want to provide 250,000 stipends a year for those teachers to come back to school to get their certification, hopefully their master's, AP, whatever it might be. And then in addition, we want to create a new generation of teachers. We want to look out for those folks that would like to go into teaching. And so if any of those, and there'll be competitive scholarships, $10,000 a year for those students that will go into math, science, and education and agree to teach for 5 years. And teaching for 5 years is very important because we find that about half of teachers drop out in those first 5 years. And then an interesting thing happened along the way. There was a fellow in New York, no reason to know him. His name is Jim Simons. He was on the front page of the New York Times about 6 weeks ago, in that he made $1.5 billion last year. Just not in his investments, just in his fees on the investment. He was the largest producing hedge fund or earner in a hedge fund, and he has done the same thing, the $1.5 billion for the last 2 or 3 years. And interestingly, he was the first NOIS Scholar, which is a National Science Foundation math scholarship, and that's what we're building this program around. And much of his success was really based around having that opportunity some years back. And again, we are running this program through the National Science Foundation. It's been used for over 30 years, and it's well, it's well respected. And he set up a program on his own, and that's where he provides financial stipends for those teachers, oftentimes that go from other areas of interest into teaching, and he helps provide them with a stipend to their income in those first few years to get them over the hump. And so we're really providing an umbrella to allow people like that. Exxon provides $100 million a year, and other corporations and individuals do provide funds for this. So now we'll be able to provide the stipends to get this, the kids through college, and then in those first 5 years, we'll also be able to help give them some stipends through the private sector to increase their salary. And as I told Mr. Simons the other day when he was in, I really don't think that we can get enough money into the program to compete with, big shots like Nortel and others that want to bring someone in. But what you're trying to do is not necessarily compete with those very top jobs, but rather for those people that are serious about wanting to teach, to give them a little additional income that allows them to feel like they're not letting their families down. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. And so I really think that we're a long way on our way to get that. There'll also be scholarships for the best and brightest for those folks that want to go into pure research and things of this nature. We're in the conference right now. I talked with Jeff Bingham this morning, and we have one little hiccup, and that is that there's the No Child Left Behind and some, I think, the other higher education bill in the Senate right now. And so some of those staff folks that are helping to work on this conference report are taking off. But we hope they're going to come back. We're knocking off most of the rough edges. And I'm very optimistic that this could very well be the major accomplishment of the first 6 months of this Congress. So hopefully we'll see that, and I think it's something that will benefit our nation and hopefully your industries. So let me stop there and take because I don't want to take. We've got some folks that really know what they're talking about coming up here after me, and see if Greg, if you want to do some questions, answers.
Just stand up and say who you are, the organization you're with, and then ask any question you'd like of the chairman.
Okay. So.
Must be pretty thorough.
Yes, go ahead.
On your bill that you're putting through Congress, how are you addressing the issue of instructional materials and curriculum to teach that?
Well, the President, and I'm not trying to get this into a partisan issue because I say this has been a very partisan matter. I raise it just to give you some context. President Bush also has a competitiveness agenda. And he put 70% of the money into to math, I think K-8 curriculum. If you look at the report, over and over and over, it says it's the teachers, it's the teachers. I asked that question to Craig Barrett when he testified before our science committee. And his answer, and he is a professor, among other things, there at Stanford, is that we've been teaching math a long time. We know how to teach math. It's not the curriculum, it's the teachers. Give us the teachers. And so we're really not trying to address the curriculum aspect of it. We're trying to get competent teachers. We think that curriculum can always be improved, but that's not where we need to put our emphasis and put our money. I welcome disagreement, but that's our approach. Well, again, thank you for letting me have a chance to be with all of you. You've got this $100 computer really is exciting, so I know you're going to enjoy that, and look forward to continuing to work with you in Nortel. Thank you.
I think that we're going to talk about Curriki today. I'm the executive director of Curriki. Curriki, which stands for a combination of curriculum and wiki, is a new nonprofit. If you'll just move the slide along. We're a new nonprofit that are trying to address the education divide, and that we see that access to education separates those who can have opportunity and those who have no hope to improve their livelihood. And that's a big mission. And as Greg already told you, Curriki was founded by Sun Microsystems founder Scott McNealy, and this is a large vision. So let's talk a little bit about what it is. The next slide, please. We know that there's several challenges today in education. There's a high cost of today's instructional materials. Quality instruction is produced by instructional experts, not easily disseminated. And the sharing of ideas is not easily facilitated, or it's expensive. And this has to do with the traditional way that we publish instructional materials and we train teachers. And that's changing. So if we'll go forward. We know also that the internet today is the great world equalizer. That's what allows me to stand here today. That's what allows us to have Nortel do the kind of things they're doing with LearnIt. We know that we can share this information. And open source is the hallmark of the participation age. Those of you that are part of Facebook, and those of you that are part of MySpace, and those of you that are using Wikipedia, and those of you even before that were involved with Linux and Apache and Java, you're part of that community. You've been there a long time. Education is just realizing the value of open source. The world today, we know we have 3 million more users each week. The transactions that are happening on the internet are accelerating, and there's massive amounts of data. We need to provide students with the ability to understand how to create this information, how to use it, and how to share it. Okay. We also today are working in a new knowledge space. Most of us have grown up, actually except for all the nice young people that are here from LearnIt, most of us have grown up in what I call a linear knowledge space. We started on page 1 of a book and we got to page 360 and we said we learned. We were given a degree at the end of 12 years of high school and 4 years of college, etc. We've moved into a much different knowledge space today. We're living in a random knowledge space. For those of you that have watched your children use the computer, they're chatting, they're doing email, sort of. They don't even do email anymore. They're using their iPod at the same time, they're surfing the internet, and sometimes even on the telephone. So talk about multitasking. But more than that, they're in this random knowledge space of learning. They no longer need to learn in a sequential order. They have the ability to go back and find where they were or get the information they need just in time. We've been talking about just-in-time manufacturing and just-in-time warehouses for a long time. But we're now talking about children learning in a random knowledge space that they learn in just-in-time. We also have several things that have changed in the way we think about education. No longer are classrooms the primary delivery device. We need to make sure that teachers are no longer the sage on the stage but guides on the side. The stakeholders do not need to be connected 100% of the time. We don't need to be learning sitting in front of a classroom all the time. We can learn at those times that work for us. We can talk to the teacher or the professor. Words and text have a monopoly on literacy. Testing will tell us what's happening and who is successful. We know none of those are true. Go ahead and move on. We're talking about some dangerous ideas here. Those of you that are in this room are part of this. We're talking about a transformative way of thinking about curriculum. When you hear about the one laptop computer, we're talking about a transformative way of access. We're also at a tipping point. In the case of Curriki or curriculum, what is the tipping point? Oops, there I go. Now I really am speaking. What is the chance that we're going to be able to change the way we develop curriculum, the way we distribute it, and the way we think about evaluating it? This is a big idea. There aren't a lot of big ideas out there, and as I said, Scott McNealy thought about this a long time, and Scott thinks he created the open source the way Al Gore created the internet. So we have a lot to live up to. And we're also creating a disruptive change. This is not easy, and people don't like things that are not easy. And when the one laptop computer gets out there and we change the way we think about access and who can have one, that's a disruptive change. That's a tipping point. And we're changing education and learning by doing it. And this is the first time in a long time where disruptive change is starting in education. Unfortunately, education tends to be the last to apply things. So I think we're going to see a lot of change about the way we learn. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next slide. So what is open source software? I just want to define this because when Scott started Curriki, he had this background in open source software. As I said, he thought he created it. Open source refers to software that's created by a development community rather than a single vendor. It's programmed by volunteers and it's free and available to any of us. And why do people get up at 3 in the morning and work on open source software? Why do they contribute to Java? Why do they contribute to Linux? Well, there's 3 reasons I've discovered since I've been in this job. The first, of course, is because they're a geek, and that's what they're doing at 3 in the morning. The second is because they think they've built something that really works and they want to share it with the community. The same reason why our teenagers today get on and share their information on Facebook. I don't understand that either. And I now heard about a program called Penguin Island. Does anybody in the room know Penguin? What? Club Penguin, yes. I was talking to some people about Club Penguin the other day, and that's a Facebook for kids that are like 2nd, 3rd, 4th graders. It's kind of scary. So again, why do people do this? 1, they're geek. 2, they think they've created something and they want to share it. And the third reason is they think they're going to find a job. Some company out there that's been watching, that's doing some job application, finds something that's been written on the internet, and they go to that person and say, gosh, can we license your work? Can we hire you on a consulting basis? And can we hire you full-time to do this? So how does this apply to open source curriculum, which is the next slide? I told Scott when I took this job there were 3 things that I had to be sure before I gave up. I have an interesting career, but I've been a professor, and right before I took this job, I was an investment banker. So before I left investment banking to come in and run a nonprofit, I said to Scott, 1, I don't know how to run a nonprofit, so you need to understand I'm going to think of this as a creative change and a startup and entrepreneurship. 2, I'm not moving to San Francisco because I want to be 3,000 miles away from you so we don't have to see each other every day. And the third thing I told him was that we're going to make, that this is not the same thing as open source software. There's a lot of things that are different. There's a lot of things that are the same, and the idea is elegant, but there's some things we have to take care of. 1, it is still a free online curriculum created and validated by the community. That's the same thing as what open source software is. But the differences are that there's a lot more governance around it. There's the governance by school boards, there's the governance by states, there's the governance by standards of learning and learning objectives. So we need to define those in a way that the open community can take part in. We need to have scope and sequence for instruction, so we need to have the community understand that there's a structure for learning. And we need to have a set of lesson plans that direct people. We need to have textbooks and other instructional materials that can be contributed to, but at some point somebody has to say, this is the version that the experts reviewed. This is the version that I think you should use. Now this is an open source community. If you want to change that, fine. But we're going to tell you that some way to mark that. That's different than the open source community. Software is pretty black or white. It either runs or it doesn't run. If you change a curriculum that says that this is how you do 2-digit addition, and now you swear it can be done this way, and it doesn't work, you really don't know that. It's not the same kind of thing, because the child may be doing something else pedagogically in their mind and still getting the correct answer, even though the algorithm to get there is incorrect. We need to provide teacher training, and as I told the congressman as he walked out, I actually do agree with him. I don't think curriculum is going to drive change in mathematics and science teaching, although science curriculum needs to be updated somewhat more than math. I do believe we need to train teachers and make better teachers to do this, and that's what Curriki is working on. We also have student assessment, and we have the ability to correlate it to standards and frameworks. So who is Curriki? We're the first internet destination for open source curriculum. There's those of you that are in higher ed know that MIT has the Open Courseware project. There's a Connections project that's doing open source curriculum development, but none of them have the ability to do it for K through 12 or have the collaborative tools necessary to do it. We're a single repository, which is a really important fact to know. We are not a linked list. Again, many of the other open source repositories are linked lists. You can't have a linked list and build a Wikipedia model because if tomorrow that link goes away and you've put it as central to your curriculum, it doesn't work. You implode. We have review and comments by subject matter experts, so we have an eBay model. People can comment, we can have experts comment, we can have people say this worked in my classroom, and at the very highest level we can actually do research around it. We can actually say how many people use this version of this curriculum and how many people use this version, and give us some feedback on what worked and what didn't work. So we're really talking about an interactive curriculum development process and a new way of delivering that curriculum. And we were founded, as I said, by Sun Microsystems in 2004. Scott was speaking at a meeting of ministers of education, and he said, what if we could take the open source model and build curriculum that could be used worldwide and people could change it and have access to whatever they needed at any time. That's a big idea, and it's not something that's going to happen, as I keep telling Scott, quickly. It's something that happens very slowly. As you can imagine, Scott is on a fast track. In terms of the fast track, we have about 35,000 members in the last year. We have about 10,000 assets of information already contributed by the community, and we are working globally with ministries of education in South Africa, in India, in the United Kingdom, in Canada. And so we're very excited about this. So going on to, so what does this mean for education? Well, now we can provide high quality content, can now be made widely available for free. Users can create or improve, not just consume the content. That means that we have an active community of teachers, parents, and learners all contributing. And the content is now becoming collaboratively developed by the community. These are all radical ideas, and there's some people out there that are quite scared about this. And I'm sure you can imagine who we're talking about. You know, departments of education, publishers, parents, test makers. There's all sorts of people that we have been spending the last year engaging in conversation to make sure that they understand the role, that they don't see this as a competitive option, but a collaborative option. So, our strategy then, as we've already said, is to build a repository, build a suite of easy-to-use tools, which we are now in the process of releasing, publish that includes collaboration tools and publishing templates. Establish a community of educators, which we're doing, and that's why we're here working with the Nortel group, but also we have just signed an agreement with the National Retired Teachers Association to review and to comment and contribute their content. And we want to engage partners to participate in local and global projects. So, one of our very exciting new partnerships, is, which will be announced officially in a few weeks, is the Nortel LearniT partnership, which we are doing to be able to, again, share all the wonderful things that are being built by LearniT, to share the process of integration of technology across the curriculum with our community, and to be able to publish information on and publish curriculum, and then share it back on the LearniT site also. So the time is now. This is a unique opportunity to bridge those who can teach to those who want to learn. And together we can eliminate the education divide. Thank you.
My name is Bilal Jamousi. I'm with Nortel in the office of the CTO, Chief Technology Officer. And I've been involved in the One Laptop Per Child project for a number of years now. I'm based in Boston, so Cambridge is close by, and I spend a lot of time interacting with the OLPC folks, the One Laptop Per Child project. So I'd like today to really share with you some of the key insights and principles of how this tool is really not so much a laptop project, but it's really an education project. And in the same way that Curriki is very much towards education and in the content and the curriculum, this tool was designed as a nonprofit project to really address the education in the developing world, and the principles do extend to the developed world as well. On that slide, the first picture you see there is really the pilot project in Nigeria, where some of the kids in school were given each one of these laptops, and it changed the dynamic of education in that school almost instantly. The teacher and the curriculum was not any longer the center of the attention, but actually the interaction between the kids and the fact that they can teach each other and learn from each other was a key part of the dynamic of teaching. And so what I wanted to really share with you today is a change in the paradigm, or a paradigm shift in education that is now possible with the technology advances in terms of the tools for education, the connectivity to the internet, the availability of curriculum online. It's kind of an ecosystem of many things that had to change to enable this change in the way we educate kids and provide education. Next slide, please. And education is critical. It's a very important part of how we can change the world, how we can address some fundamental issues in the world in terms of hunger, political stability, etc. I think it all starts on how educated people are and how much education is available. It's not so much the capability of the kids, it's the opportunity that they are given. And there are hundreds of millions of kids that would like to go to school. I think in sub-Saharan Africa, a third of the kids don't go to school, and those who do make it to the first grade, only half make it through the end of the primary school. This is a quote by Nelson Mandela in terms of the importance of education and some of the statistics in terms of penetration of education around the world. So let's go on to the next slide. And this is really the key to the discussion, the fact that there are a number of changes and developments that enable that change in technology. The one laptop per child is part of it. It's the computing device. It's a device that enables kids in developing world to have access to the internet, to read books in an e-book mode when they don't have access to regular textbooks as we have them today, and also to the teachers to have the same access, because every teacher will have one of these in these schools. The other aspect of it is the content, and Bobby talked about curricula, and you know about the Nortel LearniT. So it's about training, teaching, providing content for the teachers as well as the students. And then you need some, the applications, the multimedia collaboration today is fundamental. It allows raising the bar and equalizing the knowledge base among the teachers and the students. Imagine that you're a teacher in one of the school systems and you have some questions about, fine-tuning this algorithm or formula or this math equation. And you can instantly access some other teachers that are online. You can either send them an IM, create a video conference or an audio conference and chat with them and be able to share your experience online on your compute platform within your school setting. That opens up a global dynamic. First, it doesn't have to be within the bounds of one single country, but it really has a global reach. It's very useful for teaching languages. It's very useful to access talent around the clock, around the world. Whatever the subject matter happens to be. So the collaborative applications that are now possible through the multimedia communication enable certain dynamics that teachers did not have at their disposal before, that now they do. The fourth corner of this ecosystem is really the network. The internet is getting more and more reach around the world, and the technologies that we have today are making it easy and seamless for connectivity within the school, within the classroom, within the village, and globally. One of the technologies that Nortel contributed to this project is the wireless mesh connectivity between the laptops. So when you turn them on, there is a self-configuring mesh network, and all the laptops are interconnected. The kids, when they turn it on, they actually see, the first thing they see in the display is all the other connected laptops in the classroom, including the teachers. They can click on them and chat. They can open, there is actually a small camera here, and they can do video conferencing, microphone, speakers, so they can do all of the multimedia interactions among themselves. That mesh connectivity extends itself not only within the classroom, but across the school and within a village or a city or town, because as long as these machines are connected and powered on, the traffic hops from one machine to another, and you can connect to all the kids, as well as to the internet. And so the wireless networks today are enabling connectivity that would not have been possible, just a few years ago. And the other aspect, not only between the laptops, but also then interconnecting the schools, is now becoming more and more feasible and cost-effective to provide that connectivity back to the internet. So those are the pieces that come together that really provide a different way of educating kids, different tools that are now cost effective and actually seamless. You don't have a lot of time spending on understanding how to use the tool. It's actually part of the education system and part of the curriculum. So I talked a bit about the content. This is really about learning without borders. Once you have the internet connectivity and you have this community, global community, sharing the curriculum, sharing teaching experiences, and you have the tools and applications, then you can have that seamless communication going back and forth between the students themselves and among the teaching staff. Next, please. So there are 5 principles to the laptop. The first one is the child ownership. The reason it's called one laptop per child is that in the same way that the child owns a pencil, a notebook, shoes, they own a laptop. So it's very important that the child sees this as their own. They bring it to school, they take it home, they play with it. It's part of their backpack, and they can take it wherever they want, and they own it. It's theirs. The low ages, so this is really geared towards 6 to 12, but you can start earlier. I've given this to my 3-year-old, and they quickly figured out how to do the tam-tam, which is the music application on it that I haven't found myself. And it can go beyond those ages. A lot of my colleagues are on Nortel. Whenever I show them this, they want to grab it and go play with it. So but the idea is to start at a low age, because the best learning happens when you're playing. And the best learning happens when the kids are playing with each other, so they're teaching each other. Saturation means when you go into deployment, and that's the philosophy of the OLPC consortium, is that you go into an entire village, an entire country, an entire city, so you don't have gaps, and every kid has a laptop. And depending on the size of the country, a village in China could be millions of people. So you deploy millions of these. In other countries like Malawi or Rwanda, the whole country is 4 million people. So you go and deploy this in the 4 million, and they'll probably have 600 million kids, and 600,000 kids, and you go deploy it to the kids. So, but saturation is important so that everyone has it. Connection is critical. So the connection is part of that collaborative environment. It's part of providing those ebooks that would not otherwise be available. All of the content on the internet becomes accessible once you're connected. And the last point is the free and open source. And this is really building on the principles that Bobby outlined. All the software on this machine is open source. It was all developed in an open source community. And the content is in multiple languages. And the content is also being fed globally by the open source community. So there is a lot of interesting synergies between something like Curriki and LearnIt and the OLPC itself as a teaching tool and an education tool. Obviously, once you have these schools, the connection within the school between the kids, then you want to bring that back to the internet. And some of the experiences we've had in Africa show us the constraints in terms of connectivity, because every country is essentially an island when it connects to the internet, because you have to go up and down through the satellite, and sometimes even for connectivity within the same country, you have to go up and down through the satellite. So, and as you go through the satellite, you add delay, and your TCP sessions time out, so your internet throughput becomes quite slow. And there are things that we're exploring to try to accelerate the within the country connectivity as well across the borders. But inevitably, the connection has to be wireless because of the cost effectiveness of the solution. Next, please. This is a snapshot as of June in terms of the OLPC penetration around the world. There are many countries in South America, Peru, Panama, Uruguay, Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Mexico, that are the launch countries. We call them in OLPC. Some more advanced than others. I think Uruguay actually put a bid out for the laptops and the connectivity to help build that infrastructure within the country. In Africa, there is Nigeria, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Libya, and Malawi that are among the most advanced countries in deploying the laptop. And in many of these countries, there are actually schools with pilot projects, 30 to 100 laptops at a time, where the Ministry of Education is trying the project and seeing how the interaction happens within the school, etc. In Asia, there is Pakistan and Thailand. Next, please. So I wanted to leave you with a couple links of interest. The OLPC, you can find it on laptop.org. The LearnIT project, Kuriki, and the Academy, which is a complementary academy within Nortel to actually create the skill sets once you're in the deployment mode of operating these networks, and you need the skills to actually sustain massive deployment of either laptops or wireless connectivity. Then you need to have local resources or skill sets of people that can maintain that infrastructure. Okay, thank you.